The virtual folders are, they're not persistent.
Oh, I was thinking about the library, like we have the X drive and we have a library and.
Yeah, so how it connects is it reads folders, it doesn't read files individually, so it looks for directories.
I'm not talking about your connector, I'm talking about the library that we have on the server. We have a library folder, the XREFs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to do that, which is, I get what you're doing.
I understand what you're saying.
I want to take all of that and create the X drive where it's in the cloud, shows up everywhere.
That would be
One
better.
central library.
Yeah, that would be better for what we're doing. I don't think the blob storage is ideal for that.
Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, perfect. Share my screen. All right, I'm going to turn off my video. I'm just standing up today, and I think the angle looks a little awkward, so I'm going to turn off my video. And when you guys see my screen, correct?
Yeah, we're good.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So today we're going to go over model coordination. I'm going to show you a few things that I changed slightly from yesterday, just to kind of create some scenarios to show you, because you know, if you have a perfect model, then model coordination doesn't. I can't show you anything. So what I did yesterday, a couple things that I did that I changed from yesterday. Number one, with project files, you guys had a habit of keeping your Revit model in the project files folder. What I did was I moved the models to their own folder. I created a work in progress, and here's the architectural model. And then I've got one here for MEP and one for structural. What you guys were doing in the other project was you simply put the MEP and structural in a folder called shared, and they were sitting over here. So I pulled those out and I put them in their own work in progress, even though they're officially not. If your MEP and Revit, if your MEP and structural team are never going to work, they're just going to provide you models, then you can save them directly to the shared folder and just put them in their own teams folder. That would help. But that would help. That's fine. Okay. I do want to show you, though, this is something I did. Take a look at all the folders that are available. If I come back over to members and I change myself from a project administrator to just a regular member whose role is architect. When I come back over to the file section, and I'm just waiting, this has to refresh here in a second. But what you're going to see is you're going to see limited number of folders, and this takes about a full minute to happen. And last time I just kind of clicked back down here, just made sure I got project member. And there we go. So you'll notice the project files is grayed out. It's grayed out because I didn't give any permissions at this level, because if I give permissions here, they propagate all the way down. For somebody to see a Revit model here, then I have to give that person or that role, you know, edit permissions. And if I do that, they're going to have edit permissions everywhere. And I don't always want to do that. So I encourage you to, you know, kind of get away from putting your Revit model in the project files folder and put it in a subfolder, and then you can assign permissions specifically. I can't even look at permissions because I don't have privilege to do that. But if I did, I would show you I have different levels of permission in these different folders. I'm going to switch myself back to project admin just in case I have to do any other sort of admin work. So we'll let that continue to process there. And in a second, then we'll see the other folders in here. All right, the other thing that I did while we're waiting for this to finish populating, going back into Revit, I went into the Revit model that we used yesterday. And yesterday I created these 3D views. I created this one, which includes the architecture, MEP, and the structure. This one, which included also the site. And then I had one up there that just simply said, 3D building architecture, just simply ARC. What I decided to do, and I've done this before when it comes to model coordination, since we're going to look at the model coordination tool, while I could do a model coordination on the entire model, it's usually helpful if you break up your views to show just specific content. So I usually create a view here where I just have like horizontal content, like floors and ceilings. And this should say roofs, not room, but roofs. I have one in here for anything that's vertical, like my walls and columns. And you can decide, on any other views. I did create one here for lighting as well on purpose, and you'll see why I did that. Just to kind of create some scenarios. I purposely went in here and I moved some lights around because I wanted to create some problems with lights in your own model. Now, I can do clashes just on my architectural model, within my architectural model, or I can do clashes against MEP and structure, and they can do clashes against everybody else if they decide to. But by creating these different 3D views, it makes it easier when we go to clash detection to do it. Not necessary, but makes it much easier. So I did that this morning. I synced it to the cloud. And so if I go back in here now, I'm going to hit refresh. You're going to see a bunch of folders appear. And I'll come down here to the work in progress, architecture, and this is the model right here. And if you notice, when I come over here now to 3D views, here's my ceilings, here's my lights, and here's the walls. I numbered it on purpose because it will go in alphabetical order, and I wanted to kind of put, the entire model first. So I just called it 1.0, and then everything else that was part architecture, I just put, I just numbered it a little differently, just kind of keep it in order. That's the only reason I did that. Okay. So, model coordination. When we first go to model coordination, and I got here a separate screen, so I switched from docs to model coordination, you will come to this screen. We are in this project. The first one lists here models. Now notice it says here models. I only have 3 Revit models up in the cloud, but if you notice, it's showing a lot more than 3. It's actually showing 12. What it's doing is it's taking every 3D view and it's making it a separate model. Now, there's not really a model somewhere, in a folder. It's just, this is how it organizes it. So if I go back down here to architecture right here, you can see it's kind of a long file name, right? You got the Lake Nona Cloud Central R2021, and then it says dash 3D building dash 1.0 architecture. And then this is the 1.1 floors and ceiling. So it took the 3D views that I was sharing in the cloud, and it's treating them as though they're individual files. So I've got my structural, then I got my architecture group together, and then I've got my HVAC. This is just putting it in alphabetical order. And I can do it ascending or descending. You can see, you can see the last person that published the model. You can see the last time it was updated. And then within each view, you can see how many clashes there are. Now, for example, if I come here to lighting, I've actually got 101 clashes with lights. Now, that doesn't mean that I've got 101 lights that are clashing. It just means because I could have one light that might be clashing a column or a ceiling and a wall. So it's not the number of lights, but the number of clashes. Now, if I kind of scroll down, and you'll notice if I come down here where it says architecture, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, I've got over 1,000 clashes. Same thing here. This is because that's the entire model. So it's a lot more. If I break it up, then I've got for the entire architectural model, I've got 393. But out of those, 34 deals with ceilings, 101 deals with lights. This one is walls and columns. I have 157 with walls and columns. So it makes it easier to kind of break it up. Now, when I should mention this because I didn't cover this on Tuesday. how do we set this up? I'm going to come over here to settings. Typically, a project administrator has to create what's called a coordination space. Coordination space is nothing more than a folder to tell model coordination where to look to do clash detection. By default, it will want to look in the shared folder by default. Now, you have to say, yes, go ahead and do that. But that's the first place it wants to look in the shared folder. That's why the shared folder is really important, because the shared folder right here is where all my teams are going to put their models. All my consultants, all my engineers, they're going to put their models here. So by default, it wants to look here in the shared folder. Now we point to the shared folder, and it will look through all the subfolders that are there. And if those folders have subfolders, it'll look through all of them. So we want to be careful that we don't put Revit models here that we don't want involved in the clash detection. Now, sometimes people will just create a folder in here, you know, for others to upload Revit models. Maybe a vendor uploads a Revit model for their equipment. Well, if you do that, that piece of equipment is going to get pulled into the clash detection, and that equipment doesn't know where it is. You know, it's just kind of floating out in space. So we want to make sure that whatever models are up here, that they're all coordinated, you know, they all align and they're all used and they're all part of the construction, the final construction model. So this is the default. What's great about this is during design collaboration, remember design collaboration, whenever I'm creating packages, well, every time I create a package, it automatically puts a copy in the shared folder. That's what it does. So it's the perfect place for it to look. But if you say, well, we're not going to use design collaboration, okay, you don't have to. Then what I would do is you could still create the shared. I would not advise that because it'll be confusing. We're all used to using the shared folder with design collaboration. What I would do is I would just create a separate folder called model coordination files or examples. And then what you would do is periodically you would copy your Revit models here. And if you do this, now you have actually, you know, you can decide which models you want to include in the clash detection and which ones you don't. You know, sometimes when you point to shared, other models might get uploaded by other team members. But you're welcome to do this as well. And that's why when I come back over here to settings, I have the first one, which is just the shared folder coordination space. That's all it's called. And I said, okay, point to this folder. But then I manually created this folder, and I just called that dedicated folder. Now I'll create a coordination space now. I will tell you, when you create a coordination space and it'll immediately want to start scanning the folder for files. And then you could wait as much as 10 or 15 minutes for it to finish the scan. So, you know, while Autodesk says, yeah, we're doing live scans, we're doing scanning model coordinations on live models, you know, all the time. Well, that's true, but every time you update the model, it can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to finish processing. But in this case here, you know, maybe I want my architectural team to do clashes just on their files. So I could say, you know, architectural team. And then I'll come down here and I'll pick the folder. And since my architects keep everything in this folder, when I click create, it will create a new coordination space. And it's going to look only in this folder and any subfolders to do clash detection. And I'm not going to hit create because I don't want to take that time. So I'm going to hit cancel here. But you just name these however you want to name them. And then this is the actual location where it's going to look for files. I don't know why we can't do this, but you'll notice that there is no way to delete a coordination space. So, you know, don't go crazy creating them or just playing around with them in a real project because you won't be able to delete the coordination space. but you can deactivate it. So if necessary, if there's some that were created, you can deactivate it. All right, now I'm going to go back up to models here, and I'm just going to show you right over here on the right-hand side. This is how you can switch between coordination spaces. Right over here. So if I set up a coordination space for my architectural team, they would see it listed here. My MEP team, they could see their own coordination space. And if you click on this button, this takes you over to settings. So just two ways to get there. But here's one. This is my dedicated folder. I'm telling it to look in this folder right here. Look at these three files. The shared folder has the same three files. They're just broken up a little differently in folders. So there's my dedicated. Then I got it. Actually, those are both dedicated. So let me switch this one to shared. And it's going to look the same because I just copied files over. All right. So, and here's one thing to don't do. One last thing to mention. Do not create a coordination space that uses the project files folder. This is another reason why if you put your Revit model in project files, it will never pick it up unless you point here for coordination space. You don't want to do that because then it will pick up every single Revit model in every subfolder, every AutoCAD file, every NWC file, every IFC file, and it will do clash detection with everything. So that's another reason you want to kind of pull your Revit model out of project files and put it in a subfolder. Okay. All right, so now that we're in here, let's take a look at what we can do. So, well, this is helpful to look at all the clashes for certain views. If you come over here to this menu item, clashes, this actually generates a matrix. It will take all the models, list them vertically and horizontally, and it compares them against every other model. And you'll notice along the diagonal, it's not going to do a clash detection against itself. But over here, I could see that I've got 25 clashes, 25 structural clashes when I compare it to structural columns and beams. Diagonally, I've got 17 structural columns and beams that are clashing with my, structural, with the entire structural model. That's what it's clashing with. So it all depends on, the direction in which you do it. Well, when you first look at this chart, the greater number of clashes, the darker the shade of yellow or orange you'll see, so you can quickly identify where the most clashes are. But there is some redundancy here that we need to clean up. If you notice right up here where it says all models, this is the structural model, which includes everything. But then I have a separate view for columns and beams, floors, and walls. Well, these three are included in this. So I don't want to include the entire model. I just want to include these few here. And if I come down here, this architectural model includes everything. I'm going to get rid of that because I'm just interested in the floors, the ceiling, the roof, lighting, walls, and columns. I don't need all the MEP, architecture, structural. I don't need all of this either because I broke them up into individual views. And then I have a view here called HVAC and one called plumbing. And now I'll hit apply. So I'm now going down from 12 models to 8. And this one is more realistic because now I can come in here and I can see, yep, I've got 5 clashes involving columns and beams when I clash against my structural floors. Or I have only two floor clashes that are interfering with a bunch of structural beams and columns. So sometimes the numbers are the same, sometimes they're not. If you want to just focus on architecture, then we just get rid of these and come down here and get rid of MEP, hit apply. Now I can come over here and I've got 24 clashes in my lighting view when I clash against the ceiling, or I've got about 8 ceiling clashes that are clashing with a bunch of lights. Now, once you pick one, you could easily flip it and do something else. But I'll go ahead and I'll pick this one here. We'll see what pops up. So I'm going to click on this. I was looking at some other clashes. I haven't even looked at this clash yet. All right, now when I come here, first place it takes you is right here, where it's going to show you the different clashes. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come at the top first. This will show you the 2 files you have listed. If you want, you can add more models. But I think it's simpler to kind of keep the number of models, as low as possible, just because there's a lot of stuff on the screen that you have to go through and look at. So I've got some lights here, I've got some ceilings, I've got floors, I got a roof in here, any of these horizontal components. So I'll leave that, that's fine for now. This is a new feature. This came out just this week. I'm actually, kind of surprised. I wasn't expecting it, and then I saw it this morning. I did a little research on it. But what this gives you the ability to actually turn off specific objects. So, for example, if I just want to look at stuff that has to do with architecture, when I hit architecture, if I had anything that was part of a different discipline, like HVAC, plumbing, they would disappear. If I do electrical, notice that my architectural walls disappear, or my architectural ceilings and floors disappeared. I'm just looking at the electrical. Well, I think it makes sense for this one, since I'm doing light fixtures, and I know my light fixtures are maybe hitting only ceilings. So maybe I'll come in here and I'll say, let's just go to categories, and I'm just interested in ceilings, and then I'll come down here to lighting fixtures. That could be really helpful on a very busy, with a very busy model. So maybe I do that for now. Now, what I could do, because I've made some of these changes, I can save this view. The view includes the names of the 2 models, and then it'll include, whatever filter I set up. So I'm going to hit Save View. And over here, I'm going to put in here lighting versus ceilings. And I'll hit Save View. Now I'm going to get out of that. And the reason I did the Save View is because, you go out, you come back, and you come over to models, come over to clashes, and let's say show all. This sometimes gets reset. Well, if you come over here to views, you'll see it says lighting versus ceiling. And you can do that, and quickly it'll go there and set up your clash detection. There's something else I was going to mention. Oh, when I hit, I guess I have to do, it says update view. Let me see here. Oh, okay, yeah. Notice there's an option here that says private or public. Private means I'm the only one who's going to see that. Public means I'll make it available for everybody to see it. So I'm going to update that view. By the way, you can put in a description if you need more information there. So I'll just hit update view. Now anybody can access that view. So, again, Autodesk is providing that ability, just like we do with markups. All right, so this is the model browser. Next one down is clashes. So right up here, it's showing ceiling versus lighting. And if you notice, your ceilings are red. If I switch this around and I put lighting first, now my lighting or my ceilings are green and the lights are red. Now, the way this is supposed to work, and it usually works, but sometimes it doesn't. Lighting, this model, the one that is the primary model, when I generate clashes here, they're actually going to show up in my Revit model. I shouldn't say the clashes. I'm going to create issues that are going to show up in my Revit model. This will control what Revit view it opens up. So I wanted to open up the lighting view. Now this morning it worked part of the time, and then the other time it didn't. So we're going to test it. We'll see how it works. But if you have more than one model, you can only pick one primary, and then the rest will be listed down here. You can actually check off which other views or models to clash against. Now there's this group by. By default, it's going to group by object, lights versus ceiling. And if I come in here, I can actually group this differently. You know, maybe if this was a multi-story building and I'm doing clashes and I've got multiple floors, I might group this by level. You know, I say, you know, whatever level it's on. And in fact, if I type in level, you'll see it says, I got two options here to group by: constraint elevation from level or constraint slash level. I don't use this one too much, and I've not found a good example of it to show you when you might want to use it, but you'll notice it's basically all the properties that are available inside of Revit. And then it says show clashes below inches. So in this case, it is showing clashes for anything that is going to touch another object. But if I want to, I can actually increase it. I've got 28 clashes right now, and I can increase this. And I'm just seeing if I can reduce it. I guess with my lights, I can't, just because I've got some can lights in my ceiling. But what this basically means is, you know, a good example is when I do this. Oh, it went, there we go. I went to 20. I had 28, it went to 24. And so let's change that to maybe 4 inches. Guess I have to click off of it. No, I don't know why I did that now. Okay. So what this is saying is that if objects are touching by less than 1.5 inches, you can ignore them. But if they're more, then you want to know those clashes. So a good example is, let's say that you've got duct work and you have flex duct. Well, you can move flex duct in the field, or maybe you've got a pipe and a duct that are touching in the model, but in the field, the guys can nudge it over a little bit for room. So you can tell to ignore this and say, only show me clashes, you know, that are above 1.5. So it says show clashes below this many inches. What that means is the more clashes, the more the more it's going to show you. If you increase this number, we should see this go down, and that's why I'm a little confused. Let me do 12 inches here. I'm just really surprised that I'd have to look more in detail at this model, why it's doing that, but that's what it's supposed to do. Okay. Now, a whole bunch of clashes listed here. If you want to see more of them, you come right up at the top here and you hit filter and group. Now what I can do is I can click on any one of these clashes and I can look at it. Now by default, you know, it's going to zoom in, but the clash may be on the bottom. It may be on the top. So it may not be obvious. Like this one right here, if I flip it over here, I can see better. And sure enough, I can see that the light fixture is actually going through, you know, the ceiling. And by the way, I didn't move the ceiling. I didn't move any of these light fixtures. This was actually, oh, maybe I did move this one. Okay, I guess I did. Anyway, so that's what it's fine. So you may have to adjust the angle a little bit. Now, notice this is showing me every light fixture. If I come up here and I switch this around and I said, I've got 28 clashes. If I go to ceiling, make that my primary, I'm still showing 28, but I've got this ceiling right here that says 6 clashes. If I expand on it, it's showing me that I've got 6 individual lights. And actually, these are the can lights right here. So it's kind of grouping them together. Now the question is, okay, what do I move? Do I move the ceiling or do I move the lights? Or in this case, this is acceptable. I expect there to be lights in my ceiling, these can lights to be in here. So maybe this is this soffit. So the first thing I would do here is, all right, let's first review this and ignore certain things. Now, I could come over here and I could put a check in here. When I do that, it's going to highlight that ceiling, and then it also selects all of the light fixtures. Well, if you notice, I got the same thing going on here. It's better actually, instead of selecting it here on the screen, I'll come in here and I'm like, okay, I know this is a problem. All I have to do is just click on it. And then I'll click on this one. And I'll click on this one. And this one here. Those all look to be the same. And what happened was they were all selected over here. So it looks like, I've got 28 clashes, but 19 of them, those are valid. So I'll just say, you know what? That's not an issue. Let me go back. I did that real quick. Right down here, it says not an issue, or I can create an issue. I'm going to say that's not an issue. And I'll just put in here 19 can lights in soffit. And the reason that that's not an issue, because that could be valid interface, valid penetration. Maybe it's minimal overlap, model inaccuracy, item can flex. We use this a lot for flex pipe. Field fix or other. Well, this is valid penetration. And I just say, can lights and ceiling. I don't have to do, type all this stuff in, but I'll say can lights in soffit. And I'll just click